Hello, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Red Rising initial trilogy. So the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown is something that I picked up initially when I was working at the bookstore, and I just kept hearing buzz around it. I kept getting suggestions from customers, from other fellow employees that were saying, Danielle, this is a series you're really gonna love, this is a book you're gonna love. And then one day I did see it for 99 cents on Kobo, and I saw it on my boyfriend's shelf. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna pick it up and I'm gonna read it. And I think I maybe have a bit of an unpopular opinion. So for the trio as a whole, I do believe that it was released as an initial trilogy, and now there are 3 more books out that I definitely will be reading. But my unpopular opinion with this series is that I would rate the series in general a 4-star series. I really enjoy it. But for the initial book, it is such a wide range of ratings that I give this series. So for book 1, I actually only gave it a 3-star, and it was a generous 3-star, to be perfectly honest. I think Red Rising does a few things great. I think if you're new into science fiction and fantasy, I think it's a very digestible world. I think it's easily explained. I don't think there's much info dumping, and I think the information you get is done in a very action-filled way, so you're never bored. You're never just sitting there reading pages upon pages of info dumping, which, as a lover of, the Robin Hobbs and the slower fantasy, that doesn't bother me too much. I think I actually prefer that. But that being said, in this story, we're following Darrow, who is a red. There is a class system within this world where golds are at the top, reds are at the bottom, and a plethora of colors in between, ranging from grays to pinks to yellows. That is a very, very clear class system of hierarchy, reds being all the way at the bottom where Darrow belongs. You see just how terribly the reds are treated. They are basically miners of energy and exploited by all other colors up on top of them. Different tragic circumstances leads Darrow into infiltrating the gold class system and trying to destroy this system from the inside out, and everything that goes with that. For book 1, that's where we start, and then of course it just goes so far beyond that. After I read book 1, the ending of book 1 made me so intrigued that I picked up book 2 right away, and I read that one so fast I picked up book 3 right after. So it definitely has the momentum of a bingeable series, but what I will say is I think this has mass consumer appeal, but for those of you that are more into slower paced and more large depth sci-fi and fantasy, I would still suggest that you give this a go. So in the first book, we're basically in this Hunger Games like situation where all of these golds are put into a situation where you are trying to sort out your own hierarchy, but it's a very brutal book and a brutal system where they're allowed to kill each other. There's trigger warnings of a lot of essays and violence, and you really get to see a sort of an interesting mix of Lord of the Flies and Hunger Games, but basically with an R rating. And I think Pierce Brown does do that very well, showing the natural brutalization of humanity when they are taken out of any kind of rule system, and he does a really great job of balancing and kind of reinforcing with the gold specifically why it's important to have such a stringent system in place and what we can devolve to when we are given the opportunity. That being said, I found the writing itself to lean very, very YAE, and that's not to say it's necessarily the worst thing. Like I said, it does make it a lot more accessible, but I did find the writing and some of the dialogue in this initial book to be a little bit tedious and a little bit cheesy. There is a romance subplot in this trilogy that I'm not super interested in, and I also found to be a little bit cheesy, but it does get better, and that's basically what this review is to say, is if you stick with this trilogy, it really does a great job in showing a reflection in writers of growing with your work and how every book you can get better and better. And by book 3, I am ready this weekend to head to the store and buy the rest of the trilogy and just call it a day, because all I want to do is keep reading it. The characters grow in so much depth, while in book one I did find everyone to be a little bit of a caricature of their own representation and the roles they were supposed to be playing, but he does a really good job of breaking that mold and really taking the time to let us grow with our character. So book one is Red Rising, and then book two is Golden Sun, and I just wrapped up book three, which is Morning Star. And in terms of a complete arc, I will say I think book two was my favorite, because the in-between, and that does tend to happen a lot, because book two usually is more of a character establishment in a series. It's a lot of tension building. I think Golden Sun did a really good job of character building, plot building, but also having a really cool payoff in the end that just leaves you picking up the next book. And I think that's something Pierce Brown does really well, is not giving us a cliffhanger, but giving us one last shocking moment down to the last page of the book. So if you haven't picked it up, this is news to no one. It's a very popular series, but this is more a call to those who didn't necessarily have the best initial impression of Red Rising, to say neither did I, but I pursued with the series. There was a couple of things that still just intrigued me that I wanted to give another chance to, and honestly, because they read so fast, I thought, what's the harm? And I'm so glad I did, because this has become one of my favorite sci-fi series that I have read, so I would definitely encourage you to pursue it. Anyways, that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.